Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Me Financial Podcast. I am Michelle Moses, your host. I'm a certified financial planner, realtor, and former e-commerce store owner. And today we are going to be talking about property management do's and don'ts. And to talk about this today, I have Howard Rudin with me. And Howard is with West USA Realty and has been a realtor for 22 years and in property management for 14. He manages single-family homes, condos, and small multifamily properties for local, out-of-state, and even foreign investors. Howard owns a number of investment properties himself and knows what it's like to be a landlord. He strives to treat his clients' properties like he would his own and focuses on keeping expenses down while maximizing profits. Thank you so much for being on today, Howard.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me, Michelle. It's great honor.
I know that you are a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait to hear some of the stories that you have. Because that's what people want to know how to manage their property. Because a lot of people are interested in having rental properties, but they don't necessarily, have the time to manage them. And so I think this will be a great topic to see the different levels of service that people can get, when you own a property. But then I do think that people, we need to tell some stories of some just stuff that people have gotten themselves into.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. So, why don't we get started with just, why would you need a property management company to to manage your property?
Well, many investors don't really want to get that involved with their tenants and the emotions that come with it.
Okay.
So a lot of times, a tenant has a hardship and they'll play on an owner's emotions and end up convincing an owner to let them slide on their rent and get way behind. And then they just don't have the heart to take care of the problem. And they end up financially in a bad position themselves.
I've heard this before, that there's it's good, almost like having a lawyer in between you in a transaction or something, to just have like a neutral third party so that you aren't emotionally involved. Because sometimes you'll actually rent the places, right? So sometimes people come to you already rented, or you'll actually rent some of these properties.
So the majority of the properties that we have, we find the tenants for, we screen them, vet them, make sure they're as qualified as we can get. And then we write the leases and handle the whole thing. Sometimes we get property owners that have a property. They've been self-managing. I just took on a triplex. The rents are way under market. They needed to raise the rents. They didn't have the heart to do that. So they got referred to me. We took it over. Now we're raising the rents. We're getting on top of the property, getting the maintenance caught up that wasn't getting done because they weren't getting enough rents.
Mm-hmm.
And these are reasons why owners that have full-time careers don't need to be involved in this, because we can handle all these problems and issues for them and just send them a check every month.
And so would you say that you were already okay not getting emotionally involved with the tenants, or you're fine just delivering this news like it's just business, or does that kind of develop over time? Why don't people have this skill, I guess?
Well, I think for my part of it, I can play off as, hey, I'm a third party, independent of the owner, and I'm just here to do a job. So this is what I need to do. These are the rules we need to follow. This is the way it is. Not to say that we don't work with people, though.
Mm-hmm.
I understand things happen. People get sick. They have losses of jobs, things like that. So in those instances, if people are communicative with us, we talk to the owners and see if there's something we can do. Like, oh, you're going to be late on your rent because, your mom died and you had to fly back to Michigan and deal with that situation. Okay, well, we're not inhuman. Let's figure out a way to make this work. But the tenant needs to sign something that says, okay, well, I promise to pay you guys by a certain date. And if I don't, then I understand that there's going to be repercussions, and they're all spelled out.
Well, and as a property manager, I don't think that if it was just a person that they would know to necessarily sign something that they would catch up. They'd probably just take their word for it.
Most owners don't, and that's what happens. So then they get behind, and then the next month comes, and then they send another note, and it becomes a whole song and dance and avoidance, and pretty soon you're 4 or 5 months behind in rent from this tenant. And owners just don't know what to do. They don't know the legal ramifications. They don't know who to call. And of course, tenants still want repairs done, even though they're not paying rent. And legally, you have to do them.
Mm-hmm. So also a big advantage would be the laws. I mean, because when you just own a one-off house or maybe even two, you don't necessarily know all the laws to even evict someone or how to get them out or even make them pay, right?
Right. So we get calls from people who, like a friend of mine called the other day and said, I need to evict somebody. Can you do that for me? I'm like, no, I don't do that, but I can give you the name of our attorneys.
Okay.
So, but they had gotten themselves in a similar situation where they were, got taken advantage of. They were owed 3 or 4 months. And now the person's like, well, I'm just not going to pay you.
Wow.
And they had no clue how to go about it.
Right. Because there's definitely a lot of laws in place too.
Well, and there's specific paperwork that has to be mailed out in a certain time frames, and you have to keep track of it, and you have to provide proof to the courts to make sure that they know that the tenant was properly served.
Okay.
There's just a whole...
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
There's a lot of, I'll call it minutia.
Yeah.
But if you don't follow all these little details, it can come back and cause you bigger problems.
It's kind of like knowing HR for your company, I'd say.
That's a good comparison.
I mean, if you're going to fire somebody, then you need to have some documentation that they were doing some work at,
right. Otherwise, they're going to file an unemployment claim against you and potentially sue you.
Yeah. So it's important to know the laws. Okay. I hadn't really thought that would be the biggest factor of, and not only knowing the laws, but just the emotional of people playing on emotions and feeling bad for people.
Well, and the other thing is, so we've got some clients that are very busy doctors, attorneys, investment bankers. I've even have a few realtors who want me to manage their property because they don't want to get involved. They want to keep making money and they want to buy more property. So for those guys, all of those guys and ladies, we're handling the details for them. I get all the repair calls. If somebody calls me at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night that their air conditioning's not working, I'm not sending anybody out on their roof at 10 o'clock at night. But we're getting the calls made the next morning. We're getting people taken care of versus if, you, Michelle, are on vacation, you don't want that call.
Right.
And a lot of calls come in on holiday weekends. It seems just miraculous.
Yeah, that's when it happens.
Things break on the 4th of July.
Yeah, and they're home too. So, I mean, they might just be at work other times. And then when they're actually at home using all their stuff, then, things break or they notice that it's broken, I guess. Yeah. And so when you are brought on, are you building in your fee in the rent? So like let's say somebody already had somebody in there and they were, what do you normally see? Is that because are people hiring you before they actually get the renter in there? Because that's what you said happens most of the time, right?
So if they hire me before the tenant's been placed, which is what we prefer, because then the lease gets written the way we want it written with all the rules and restrictions we want, because we're going to require renter's insurance, no smoking. We don't allow certain breeds of dogs. There's a number of things that we put into our lease that if you went and rented to a tenant on your own, you may not have thought about, and then you don't have it. And I can't just arbitrarily add things on until the lease expires.
Okay.
So ideally, we prefer to find the tenant, screen the tenant, do all of our vetting, and then say, okay, we've approved Susie, and here's her situation, and we're ready to roll with this. When we inherit a tenant, which is what you're describing, then we've got to deal with them until the lease is up. And if they're a good tenant, then we just say, okay, well, we're writing a new lease, and it incorporates the rest of the rules that we have with the rest of our tenants. And then we present it to them, and if they want to stay, they've got to sign that lease. As far as the fees go, so if you have a property and whatever it's rented for, currently we have to honor that for the balance of that lease, and the owner needs to understand that, okay, well, if you're going to hire me, you're going to pay me a percentage of that until it expires. Then we'll raise the rent, because you can't just raise the rent in the middle of a term.
Right.
And then we can talk about, okay, here's the market comps for your property. And then where do you want to be, and understand that, you're still paying me a commission,
right?
A percentage.
Okay. So that is how you get paid, as a percentage of the rent.
So we have 2 fees that we do. So we have a tenant acquisition fee, and that's a percentage of the value of the lease. And it gets split between myself and the agent that brings the tenant to us, because we put it out on the multiple listing service and about 100 other websites it gets pushed out to. So if a tenant comes with their own agent, the agent gets part of it and my company gets part of it. If somebody calls me off of a sign or through Zillow or Realtor.com, then it's a reduced commission because it's just me involved. There's no other agent.
Right. Okay.
In either case, I write the whole lease because we want it written the way we want it written. And then from then on, there's a monthly percentage that we take.
Off of every single rent.
Every month. Yes,
Okay.
while it's occupied.
Right.
And then the most preferred thing for us is that we get a great tenant. You bought a property yourself and you tell me, I'm planning on keeping this property to be retirement income. So you bought it, when you're in your 40s, and we start renting it out, and we've got Susie living there, and we're coming up about month 10, and I call you up and I say, Michelle, hey, Susie's lease is up in 2 months. She's been a great tenant. I've been in the property. She's taken good care of it. She always pays on time. We've never had a bounce check. If you want to keep her, here's what I suggest we do. We raise it X, or we keep her the same, depending on what the market is.
Okay.
And if you say, great, offer her a renewal, as long as she renews, we charge you $100 fee for just the paperwork to do the renewal. And then we just keep going at our monthly percentage. Susie says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be renewing because I got engaged and I'm moving into my fiance's house. Well, then we start over and we've got to rehab the house and get everything ready and do the whole commission again. So my goal is to keep people in your house as long as possible, because it saves you money. Every time there's a turnover, you've got to do some cleaning, some touch-up painting. You've got to turn the power and water and gas on in your name. It starts
a lot.
to add
Yeah,
up.
it is. It's a lot, and it's a lot of legwork. And so, are you going by the properties on a certain time frame to check them out?
We typically get in all of them once a year.
And you have to organize that with the tenant.
Oh, yeah. Legally, they have to have a 48 hours notice. And typically, most tenants are working, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So what I'll do is I'll pick a section of town and I'll call 5 to 6 tenants, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to be in the neighborhood on Sunday morning. Can I stop by between 9 and 12? I only need 10 minutes.
And you just walk through all the rooms. And what are you looking for? Are you looking for if they painted, if there's holes in the walls?
We're looking for damage. Has the air filters been changed? Have they changed the color of the walls? We take a list with us and it says, well, Susie's got, a pug. And if I walk in and there's a pug and a pit bull, then we have an issue. So, do they have the same pets that they were supposed to, or they had no pets and now they've got 3 dogs? Those are things we need to know about because you can't just do that. That's a violation of your lease.
Right. And so then you would charge them. Then you would basically charge them if they had more dogs.
Well,
or you'd have to kick them out.
We have a discussion and basically it's like, hey, I got to get approval on these pets from the owner. And if the owner says, yes, I'll allow the pets, but I need a pet deposit, then we go back to them and say, here's the deal. And if they say, oh, well, I'm not interested in that, I'm keeping the dog, well, then we serve them a notice that they've got to get out.
Okay. And what if they haven't changed because this is what always fascinates me. So what if they haven't changed like the air filters? Because I think things like that, I didn't know about it. I was 22 and renting. I didn't know that you had to do any of this stuff. I didn't even know how to change a light bulb. I mean, that you would change a light bulb with the same wattage and, so I can't imagine the stories because I actually cared and was clean. So I can't imagine the stories. Do you tell them to then change? And I know this is just a little example of something, but do you then tell them to change the air filters or do you carry around a bunch of different sizes?
I don't carry 57,000 air filters
right, okay.
in my car. It would be impossible. But our lease specifically states that the tenant's responsible for changing light bulbs. Air filters need to be changed at a minimum of every other month. It also states under the air filter section that any damage caused to the air conditioning system by the tenant's lack of changing air filters will be deducted from their security deposit.
Okay. And,
so
and you highlight that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just thinking about when I was 22. I mean,
we show them where the air filter is.
All right.
Show them how to change it. If it's 12 feet in the air, we show them, you just undo those 2 screws up there and panel leans down. And, but we just had a tenant that moved out and the owner had supplied them a case of air filters. So they had the filters. They didn't change the filter. We charged them to clean the air ducts and the coils on the air conditioning because they were filthy. So they took about an $800 hit out of their security deposit.
Because they didn't change the ill filter. Okay.
And we sent them the receipts and a notice. You have to send what's called a statement of disposition of deposits. And we sent it to them, and they didn't say one word about it.
Okay,
Because
they
knew,
accepted it.
Well, and we also sent them a copy of the lease with it highlighted again, said, you failed to do this.
Okay.
So
I always think about that, just little things, because I know when I rented my house, I wrote in there that they had, that my lawn company had to control the water because I didn't want all my plants to die. Things like that. I mean, that can get expensive that you really need to think about. Do you write that into some of the leases about what plantings?
Our leases say that, landscapers are coming twice a month. The landscaping timer is not to be touched by you. Timers are controlled by the landscapers. Swimming pools, it's the same thing. Don't change the timing on the pool. If you mess up the pool, you're going to be responsible. We also put a note in there due to experience that said, hey, look, we're subject to monsoon storms in the summertime. So if we have a monsoon between pool visits, the pool guys come in every week, and you want it cleaned, you're going to either have to pay the guy to come or use a net and a brush and clean it up. Because when a monsoon hits, these guys are just overwhelmed.
Yes, they are.
And they're already scheduled once a week at all these pools, so they can't be making double visits to everybody. There's just not enough time in the day. For
those of you listening from out of Arizona, monsoons are just really big storms that roll through in the summer. That's how we kind of get our rain. You guys may get, I guess they'd be typical to kind of Florida with all the lightning and everything, but they roll through at night usually, or in the evening, and they just blow a bunch of stuff off the trees, and sometimes there's dust storms, so then you get a bunch of dust at the bottom. So it's just kind of a different ecosystem out here, but it's just a really bad storm.
Yeah, the biggest issue is the dust.
Yes, because then you have to scrape the sides of the pool and everything like that. Okay, so you'd have a lot of things, but it just kind of depends on the property.
Right, so if somebody's living in a condo where the condo association takes care of virtually everything outside of their four walls, it's a much different lease than if you're renting a residential single-family home for me that has a pool.
So do you charge a different percentage based on a condo and a house?
No.
Oh, really? Even though the house is more work?
There's more work involved. Overall, what ends up happening is you end up with owners that you start out buying a condo, and then you decide you're going to buy a house for yourself and you don't want to sell the condo because you've got a great interest rate, so you hire me to rent it out. And then a couple of years from now, you say, gosh, we're going to buy a bigger house and we're enjoying so much the money that we're getting from the condo, we're going to go and buy a bigger house and keep the house we're in now. We're going to rent the house. So we've just got a set of fees, whatever.
Okay.
It's the same no matter what the type of property.
Okay. Well, because you're just doing a yearly walkthrough. You're not necessarily going by and looking at the pool all the time.
No, but all of our properties with pools are required to have, the owners are required to provide a pool service.
Right. Which is obviously then covered by the rent.
Right. So the owners, we build it in, but the pool guys are our eyes. So we've got one pool company that takes care of like 7 pools for me. And then depending on the parts of town that they don't cover, we have a couple other guys. But those guys are also our eyes and ears throughout the year. So, like I've got this lady, her name's Melanie. So she'll call me up. She's like, hey, there's something weird going on at this house. You probably need to stop by. And then she'll tell me what it is. And I'll just miraculously be visiting your house on.
Yeah, that's how it was with mine. It was my pool guy and my yard guy because I trust them a lot. And they'd be like, they haven't answered their door in a month and I haven't been able to get in there to do anything. Or they've turned the water off a couple times because they didn't want to pay for it. So yeah, I had a lot of issues, and I just managed my one with, these couple people that I rented from thinking I would get the experience, but I would say that I probably wouldn't do it again.
And that's where a lot of our clients come from. They get frustrated by the stuff that goes wrong.
And I undercharged. I should have charged a couple $100 more just because of the maintenance and things that popped up. And I should have been, and I felt guilty raising the rates because they were barely getting by. And I felt bad because I've been there before, and I get it. But I also needed to realize that they were renting a house with a pool and a lot of lush landscaping. They were renting pretty nice for their stage in life.
They were renting above their means.
Yes.
And so that's why we require somebody to make 3 times the amount of rent per month. Because when you start getting below that,
then that's when people start to
issues where it's like, oh my gosh, we have a pool and the water bill was $300 a month because this pool evaporates like crazy in the summer.
They don't realize how all the little maintenance things with all those nice things. Yeah.
And we rented a 3,500 square foot house and the air conditioning bill was $750. So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And we tell people, okay, this is a big house. You're prepared for a large utility bill?
Do you give them examples of what the utility bills are before they move in?
So we don't necessarily know what the utility bills are because they were in the tenants' names. If the owners have been living there, I can get an average. Like,
okay,
what did you pay during the summer? What did you pay during the winter?
Because I think that would be helpful because people don't understand in the summer how much your electric bill goes up.
Tremendously.
And if you haven't been in a house before.
Or if you haven't been in Arizona before.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a lot of people are just moving here and they don't get it.
And they get sticker shock.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Okay. And so what are some things that you think people need to watch out for when looking for a property manager? Because I think this is a dream of a lot of people. They would love to have rental properties just because it is one of the last remaining ways I think that you can get depreciation on your taxes and really get a lot of tax write-offs. People that make a lot of money, they're always looking for ways to get write-offs. And they often come to me and I'm like, you got to buy property or you can do these investments over here, but you're not going to get as much depreciation on these investments. You're going to get a lot more if you own a rental property. Because not only do you get to write off the house and the expenses, but you get the depreciation of the house written off. And so a lot of times that kind of rolls over into your current job income that you get to write off. But, it'll really lower your taxes, I guess is all I'm trying to say.
Plus, they get the appreciation on the house.
Exactly. It's leveraged appreciation.
They're building generational wealth, depending on what they're planning on doing. Real estate, as you just said, is one of the greatest ways for Americans to truly increase their net worth. Yeah,
if you can start to buy an investment property and do something, or a condo or anything like that. So what are some things that you think people that, and I know that we've kind of covered this, of the emotions, but do you think that there are just certain things that people need to watch out for when they're buying an investment property and thinking about, maybe doing it themselves versus hiring someone?
Well, one of the most important things I think is that the person buying the house truly needs to understand what the rental market is for the house they're buying. Just because they're buying a house that costs $300,000 or $600,000 or $1 million doesn't mean they're going to be able to make their payment
with the rent.
So they need to be looking at how much are they putting down. They need to consult with their mortgage person to see what is my monthly payment going to be on this house, and if I put another 5 or 10% down, what is it going to do? You don't want to just cover your rent because you're going to need to cover your rent. You're going to need to cover expenses that come up unexpectedly, like I just had to put a brand new air conditioning system in a property. It was $7,000. Mm-hmm. Those things come up every few years, and if you're not prepared.
Yeah, and every time a tenant moves out, you kind of need to change the carpet, or you need to do a lot of the flooring, or there might need to be a new toilet or some plumbing issues.
Right. So turnovers, I tell people, you're looking at a minimum of $3,000 up to maybe $5,000 to $10,000, depending on, if somebody was in your house for 10 years. You're going to need carpet. You're going to need paint. There's going to be other repairs, a lot of just normal wear and tear. If a tenant's there for just a year, a lot of times the carpet can be cleaned and we can just touch up the paint. So it really depends, and it also depends on the tenant. Some tenants are rougher on places than other tenants. Some tenants, you barely know they even lived there. They don't put any nails in the wall. But I had a house we walked in and somebody had hung over 100 crosses through the house.
That's how mine was. They had hung all kinds of pictures and shelving, like in every, it was just, it was everywhere.
It necessitates a full repaint, which is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I found is, I was okay, and I definitely had some hiccups through my experience. But then when they moved out, deciding what was normal wear and tear and what wasn't, that was when it was glaringly obvious that I had no idea what I was doing and what I got myself into. And that's why I would never do it again. I mean, that's another reason I would never do it again. And I would hire someone out, not only just because of the calls and things like that, but I didn't know, I had a broken window. Is that normal wear and tear? Was
Not
it actually
at all.
right? So I charged him, but I had to do a lot of research on a lot of this stuff that, and then when the painters came in and they broke a lot of stuff, and I wasn't sure, I hadn't gone through in detail enough yet to know what the renter had broken versus what the painters had broken. And so there was just so many things that I did in the wrong order and wasn't sure what was wear and tear. So just take it from me. And I feel like I knew a lot, just from my business and knowing things, but knowing the law when it comes to renters and your property management is really, it is, there's a lot of minutia in there that you have to know.
Well, one thing, anybody who's thinking about doing this and investing in rental property, they should take a look at the Arizona Landlord-Tenant Act. It's available online. It tells you what the tenant's rights are and what your rights are, and it's a really good thing to just get familiar with, because there are things that can get you in trouble. And for example, if we evict somebody, if you don't pay your rent, they send you what's called a 5-day notice. It says you've got 5 days to pay or quit. Well, most tenants don't just move out. So then we go to court, and some of them show up in court, some of them don't. They go in front of the judge. The judge says, "Did you pay your rent?" And they usually come up with a million excuses. And then they get told, "Well, I'm sorry, you're evicted, and you've got a judgment now for X." So it includes the legal fees, the court fees, the service of process, late fees, and the rent. Chances are you're never going to see that money.
Right. That's a lot of money to be added up versus just paying your rent.
But that gets put on their credit as a judgment. So then they've got 5 days to get out. If they're still there, then I've got to go back to the court and get what's called a writ. When I get the writ, a constable, myself, and a locksmith meet at the property. The people are there. They've got to grab whatever they can in about 5 minutes and leave. And then they have 14 days to come back and get their belongings. If they don't get their belongings...
So there's people that don't come back and get their belongings.
Right. And then...
They don't care.
Usually what they've left behind is not stuff anybody would want.
Okay.
So then that adds on to your expense. You can put it on their disposition of deposits. You're going to keep their deposit, of course, because it's going towards the big bill you've got. But you're going to
their deposit is like 1 month or one and a half months of rent. That's not going to cover much at all. Yeah.
No.
A couple $1,000s is not going to.
That's why it's important that you vet tenants. And one of the things that over all these years that we've really found to prove to be true is that a lot of times a current landlord wants to get rid of a tenant, and they'll give a glowing reference. It's the previous landlord that you talk to that tells you, "Oh my God, do not rent to these people. They were horrible. They wrecked my place. They did this, they did that." Those are the people you really want to get a hold of.
Okay, the previous landlord. All right.
And then just a couple little things that people should think about, because the biggest problem that we have with rental properties is water damage from leaks. And so a couple tips for people, and you should do this in your own house too. One is you should get steel braided supply line hoses for your washing machine, because the rubber hoses that they sell you with the machine end up bursting, and that causes tens of thousands of dollars of damage to your house and your floors. And then if it floods the house, you got tenants who are displaced, and it just becomes a huge, huge mess. You also probably want to have, when you're going to turn your property into a rental property, or when you first buy your house, get all your supply lines checked and your shutoff valves. We routinely just replace them because they freeze up with our hard water. So being able to shut your water off at each faucet is a big plus. So it's an inexpensive way to save yourself headache. And then anybody who's turning their property into rental property, they need to talk to their insurance agent, and they need to convert their policy from a homeowner's policy to a landlord-tenant policy. And that reduces your insurance because you're not insuring your personal property. But then we require all the tenants to have a renter's policy, and they need to send us proof of it within 10 days of moving in. They have a dog, we require $100,000 worth of dog bite liability, because no matter how friendly you think your dog is, every once in a while, those dogs will bite somebody, and it ends up being a huge problem.
Right. And do you often, so you actually see the renter's insurance that they're getting, and you require them to get it and then turn it in?
So they're required to get it, and then their insurance company is required to send us a notice of the policy and stating the coverage.
Okay.
So it'll say, if you were my landlord, the tenant would send me the policy, and we have them say, Michelle's an additionally interested party. So that way we know that you've been named in it, and anything that they make a change. So sometimes a tenant will get a policy, and then 3 months later they'll cancel it because they don't want to pay it. Well, if we get that, we send them a 10-day noncompliance notice saying you let your renter's
So
insurance
it's kind of
lapse.
like our cars here. If we let our auto insurance, then they say, well, your plates are going to expire. You need to put your auto insurance back. Yeah.
Right.
Same kind of thing. And so are you still required to register your house as a rental with the state of Arizona?
It must be registered with the county
Okay.
on maricopa.gov.
Okay.
If you don't, they'll come after you.
And basically what happens is you pay a higher property tax rate.
Slightly.
It's not that much.
It's not really
it's not
anything to be worried about.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about that. But they will catch you, because I didn't know that. That was another thing I didn't know. And then I got a letter that said, hey, it looks like your house is rented. And I don't even know how they found that out. How'd they find that out?
They find it out when your tenant goes to put the water in their name. Typically.
Okay. All right.
So.
And the title hasn't changed on the house.
Right. So it was in Michelle's name, and Howard rented it, and Howard put water in his name. And it's like, well, wait a second. Why does Howard have water in his name when it's Michelle's house?
Yeah. And so then when we moved back into the house, we moved it back. We had to let Maricopa County know that it was not a rental and change it back into primary owner, whatever, owner occupied, whatever they would call that.
Owner occupied.
Yeah. So there are a lot of details. I mean, we have covered, I'm sure, just part of the details that pop up with some things.
And one other thing real quick is most of the cities and towns in Arizona require rental tax to be collected. It's supposed to go out in 2025. But I don't know. It's a lot of money that the cities will lose.
Yeah.
So we have to get a license for you. We collect that tax every month, and we do the returns to the state every month, which then they send to the cities.
Okay. And I mean, even touching on that, I think that I went to a couple meetings about that, and I think it's a good thing because renters aren't paying property taxes, right? And we need to be paying for if they're using ambulances and fire trucks and, all of the emergency services. Otherwise, cities have no way of paying for these things for the renters.
Yeah, and it goes into the general fund for the cities. I mean, they're still collecting the property tax from the owners, but
yeah.
And then we require our owners, because of liability, they need to make their mortgage payments, their HOA payments, and their insurance payments, because that way they know they got paid, and God forbid some reason we missed a payment, they don't end up in a problem.
Right, because you still own title of the house, so you need to make sure your HOA is paid and all that kind of stuff. That could be a lien against your house later on. And so, okay, so to wrap things up also, what are some things when you're looking at property managers? Are there like some red flags to see if people are shopping around for some? You're just looking for some experience and how many years?
I would look for the following. I would talk to them about their experience. I would definitely ask if they own any rental properties, because in my experience, people who don't own a rental property don't seem to care as much about how much you're paying for things.
Okay. It's more like if you've done it yourself, then you understand, you have empathy. Yeah.
Right. The other thing is some companies have their own repair staff that they try and keep busy no matter what, which is not
always
a good thing.
Yeah.
So for us, we took on a client with an apartment building, and he said, I've gotten charged almost $30,000 in interior painting in the last year. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
Why? He said, I don't know. Every time anybody moves out, it seems like the whole place needs to get painted. And we've had a lot of turnovers in our complex. And the way we do it is we only paint the walls that need to be painted. So, it's quite common that people don't have a headboard, so that the wall where the bed is against usually has some oils on it from people's hair. And so that wall typically needs to get painted. And if they put a lot of nails in the wall or a big TV mount, those are things that necessitate painting. But, there may be 3 walls in a living room that are still perfect shape. So we'll just paint the one wall. Instead of spending thousands of dollars, we can, touch up the whole house for maybe $1,000 to $1,200. And these are things as an owner I can appreciate, because we've got properties and we don't like, when we
Yeah, you don't need to
spend
do
for a full
unnecessary
repaint.
work. Yeah, just to employ people for the sake of it.
And the other thing is that there's management companies that charge a markup for work they hire from the outside. I don't do that. And any management company that's doing it is legally supposed to disclose it to their clients. There are companies out there that don't. So you really want to, probably look them up on BBB, make sure they're licensed, make sure they don't have any complaints with the Department
Look at
of
some
Real
reviews.
Estate.
I mean, are you reviewed online, like on Yelp or Google or anything like that? I'm sure there's.
I don't have any of that I'm aware of, but what I will always do is I can provide any person who's interested in having me manage their property, 3 or 4 of my clients, that they can call and question any way they want.
Okay.
And I always tell people that, if you're going to get a manager and you're going to have investment properties, you need to be prepared that we're going to collect your rent and you're not going to have it on the first day of the month. You need to be prepared to make your mortgage payment ahead of time, and you'll get reimbursed from us on the back end. So, rent's due on the 1st. It's late after the 3rd. We typically get it in from our tenants between the 1st and the 3rd. Then we have to process it. It has to go to the accounting department. We wait a day or so for the check to clear. And then we do any disbursement. So if we're paying your pool guy or your landscaper, or there was a repair bill, we pay all those bills, take out our percentage, and then direct deposit our money.
What if there's if there's a big expenditure that is larger than what the rent is, then you would actually ask the landlord for reimbursement.
Of course.
Correct?
And
Okay.
we set limits based on the property and the owners on, okay, I can authorize a repair up to $500 without having to call you. There's certain repairs that are mandated by law we have to do. So if the water heater goes out, I'll let you know, hey, we got to put a new water heater in today, but there's not a choice. The Arizona Landlord-Tenant Act requires,
You have to have running water.
Air conditioning, heating, hot water, so those are items that we have to get fixed.
Okay.
So, but generally speaking, we're in communication with our owners whenever there's something major. But, if you've got an electrical switch that stopped working, I honestly am not picking up the phone to call you to say I sent the handyman out to fix the $49 switch. It's just going to be on your statement.
Right.
But, your pool pump went out, which happened yesterday for a property. And, that's an expensive repair. It still has to be done. But I called, gave him a heads up saying, hey, here's what it's going to cost. And we're going to do this on Wednesday. So.
Yeah. And I think as an owner, it's hard to trust whether some of these repairs are necessary or not, especially, like if tends to be a lot, then you might start to not trust the tenant. And so it's good to have, again, I think it would just be good to have a third party in there that like, no, this happens all the time, or, that just has experience with other properties.
Well, the other thing that I try and do is, so we had a younger tenant in his early 20s call me up. It's like, the garbage disposal stopped working. I need a new garbage disposal. Well, did you press the reset button on the bottom? What is that?
Yeah.
So, okay, open the cabinet, get down there. There's a yellow or red button. Push that up with your finger. Oh, wow, working now.
Great.
So, the advantage is I showed him how to fix it. I saved him time having to wait for a repair guy. I saved my owners probably at least $200 or more. So
Just from a phone call.
from a phone call. So
Yeah.
these are things, I mean,
And
a lot of
especially
owners would know to do that too.
Yeah, but even if the owner's busy and at work all day, and then you've got this other thing and you've got kids and, I mean, it's work. And that's the way I describe owning a rental property to people. I mean, it's work.
without
I
a
mean,
doubt.
owning any real estate, it is work. It is a job that you're doing. It's not like you just make this investment and then it starts to print money. And I think people, and that's why it turns a lot of people off, honestly, is because they're just like, I just don't want to deal with all of that. But there's certain people that it's wonderful for, but then for others, there's other investments and then they want to do more things, with me and stuff. So
it just depends on risk tolerance.
yeah, it does. And so it's like to get all of those tax deductions that I was talking about, it really is some work. But it can be easier, if they hire somebody like you.
Yeah. And not to say
Really.
that you can't do it yourself. So.
Yeah, you could, but I just think this is a great episode so that you can see some of the things. You brought up some wonderful examples that are just, run of the mill everyday stuff. And we didn't even get into the horror stories and all those types of things.
Well, I'm sure we could do that another time.
Yeah, we could do that. We could have maybe a fun one of just, here are the horror stories of property management. Here are the worst ones. Top 5.
I'll have to write my book.
Yeah, we could get into that. Well, Howard, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, Michelle, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, a lot of good information here. And Howard's information will be in the show notes. And be sure to tell your friends and subscribe. And thank you so much for listening, everybody. I really appreciate the feedback that I'm getting. And I hope this helped you guys in some little way.